The evening sky had turned a deep shade of gray as heavy rain clouds gathered overhead. 17-year-old Andre was driving his mom's old Honda Civic, trying to make it to his evening shift at Wilson's Auto Parts. The windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically against the glass as the first drops of rain began to fall. That's when he spotted something through the drizzle. An elderly man bent over the rear tire of a modest-looking sedan pulled off to the side of Roosevelt Avenue. Most cars were speeding past, their drivers eager to get home before the storm hit. Andrew glanced at his watch. He was already running late for his shift, and Mr. Wilson had warned him about tardiness last week. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the way the old man's shoulders slumped in defeat, or how he kept looking helplessly at passing cars. Andrew thought about his own grandfather, who lived across town and often needed help with simple tasks. Without overthinking it, he pulled over, grabbed his raincoat from the back seat, and stepped out into the drizzle. "Need some help, sir?" Andrew called out, jogging over. The elderly man turned around, relief washing over his weathered face. He wore a plain button-down shirt and khaki pants that looked expensive but well-worn. Despite his apparent wealth, there was something humble about his appearance. "Oh, thank heavens," the man said with an accent Andrew couldn't quite place. "Maybe South African. I'm afraid I'm not as good with these things as I used to be." He gestured at a flat tire with a frustrated wave. Andrew smiled, already rolling up his sleeves. "No worries, I've changed hundreds of these at the shop. Let me take a look." The rain was picking up now, but Andrew barely noticed as he got to work, explaining each step to the older man, who watched with genuine interest. "You work at an auto shop?" the man asked, holding an umbrella over both of them. "Yes, sir. Wilson's Auto Parts, just down the road. Been there almost 2 years now." Andrew carefully positioned the jack under the car. "My mom's a mechanic too. She taught me everything I know about cars. Well, almost everything. Still learning new stuff every day." The old man nodded approvingly. "You seem quite knowledgeable for someone so young. What are your plans for the future?" As Andrew worked on loosening the lug nuts, he found himself opening up to this stranger. There was something trustworthy about him, like talking to a favorite teacher. "I'm actually really into engineering. Been building my own solar-powered gadgets since I was 12. Started with a small phone charger. Now I'm working on a more efficient design for solar water heaters." He paused, slightly embarrassed by his enthusiasm. "Probably sounds silly." "Not at all," the man said, leaning in with interest. "Tell me more about this solar water heater design of yours." And so, as Andrew worked on changing the tire, he explained his ideas about improving heat transfer efficiency and reducing production costs. The old man asked surprisingly technical questions that made Andrew realize he must have some background in engineering himself. Time flew by, and before they knew it, the spare tire was securely in place. The rain had picked up considerably, and Andrew was soaked despite the shared umbrella. But he felt good about helping, even if it meant being late for work. "You've saved me a great deal of trouble," the old man said, reaching for his wallet. Andrew quickly shook his head. "No need for that, sir. Happy to help." The man studied him for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card instead. "Take this, at least. You never know when connections might come in handy." Andrew accepted the card politely, tucking it into his wet jacket pocket without looking at it. He waved goodbye and ran back to his car, already planning how to explain his tardiness to Mr. Wilson. Little did he know that the simple act of kindness he had just performed would set in motion a chain of events that would completely transform his life. The next morning, Andrew couldn't stop yawning during first-period chemistry. He'd worked late to make up for his delayed arrival, with Mr. Wilson surprisingly understanding after hearing what happened. Good deeds don't go unnoticed. His boss had said it with an unusual smile. During lunch break, Andrew sat at his usual spot near the cafeteria window, pulling out his mom's homemade sandwich. As he ate, he remembered the business card from last night, still tucked in his rain-soaked jacket. He fished it out, the paper slightly wrinkled from the rain. His heart nearly stopped when he read the name. Elon Musk. The sandwich dropped from his hand. Andrew read the card again and again, convinced his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. But there it was in elegant print. Elon Musk, followed by contact information and credentials that made his head spin. No way, he whispered to himself. No way. He quickly pulled out his phone and searched for images of Elon Musk's father. His hand started shaking as he matched the photos to the man he'd helped last night. The same distinctive features, the same accent he couldn't quite place earlier. It all made sense now. Andrew barely noticed when the lunch bell rang. His mind was racing with the realization that he'd spent nearly an hour talking about solar energy innovations with the father of the world's most famous tech entrepreneur. He even turned down payment from him. His best friend, Chen, dropped into the seat next to him, taking one look at his face and asking, "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Before Andrew could answer, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. His thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding. After 3 rings, he finally answered. "Hello, is this Andrew?" a professional-sounding woman asked. "I'm calling from Mr. Musk's office. Do you have a moment to talk?" Andrew's voice came out squeaky. Yes, I do." Chen watched curiously as Andrew's expressions shifted from shocked to disbelief to pure joy. When he finally hung up, his hands were trembling so much he almost dropped his phone. "They want me to visit their facilities," he managed to say. "All expenses paid. They said Mr. Musk was impressed by my ideas of the solar water heater. They want to hear more." Chen's jaw dropped. "What facilities? What are you talking about?" Andrew told him everything about last night, the flat tire, the rain, the conversation about engineering. With each detail, Chen's eyes grew wider. "Bro," he said finally, "this is like something out of a movie." But reality came crashing back when Andrew thought about his mom. She worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, and he knew she'd be skeptical of any offer that seemed too good to be true. How would he convince her this was real? That evening, he waited nervously at their small kitchen table as his mom read through the official email he received. Her forehead wrinkled with concern as she scrolled through the details on her phone. "I don't know, baby," she said finally. "This seems too good to be true." Andrew finished. "I know, Mom, but I swear it's real. They said we can verify everything. They'll even send all the official documents and credentials you want to check." His mom looked at him for a long moment, then smiled softly. "You really did just stop to help someone with a flat tire." Andrew nodded, "Just like you always taught me." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Let me make some calls and check this out properly. If everything checks out—" She paused, her eyes getting misty. "Well, maybe all those solar experiments in the garage are finally paying off." Andrew beamed, his heart full of hope. But even as excitement bubbled up inside him, he couldn't help wondering what other surprises lay ahead. After all, this was only the beginning. The following week felt like a dream to Andrew. After his mom thoroughly verified everything, making numerous calls, checking credentials, and even consulting with her family lawyer, she finally gave her approval. The conversation that followed would stay with Andrew forever. During dinner at their small kitchen table, Elon Musk himself called. Andrew's hands shook so much that his mom had to put the phone on speaker. They talked for almost an hour, and Andrew found himself opening up about ideas he'd never shared with anyone except his engineering teacher. "You mentioned a more efficient design for solar water heaters," Errol said, his accent warm and encouraging through the speaker. "Walk me through your thinking." Andrew glanced at his mom, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, he explained how he'd been experimenting with different materials and designs in their garage. "The current systems waste too much heat," he said, gaining confidence as he spoke. I've been working on a new insulation method using recycled materials. It could cut costs by almost 40%. Interesting, Errol replied. And how would you handle the heat transfer issue in colder climates? For the next 20 minutes, they delved deep into technical details. Andrew pulled out his notebook, flipping through pages of sketches and calculations he'd made during lunch breaks at school. His mom watched with tears in her eyes as her son confidently discussed engineering concepts with one of the most influential people in the tech world. "Send me those sketches," Errol said finally. "I'd like our team to look at them before your visit next month." After the call ended, Andrew sat in stunned silence. His mom reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I always knew those crazy experiments of yours would lead to something special," she said softly. "Though I have to admit, I didn't expect anything quite like this." The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Andrew's teachers were amazingly supportive when they learned about the opportunity. His engineering teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, spent extra time after school helping him organize his research and polish his presentations. "Remember," Mr. Rodriguez told him, "they're not just interested in your ideas. They saw something special in you as a person. Don't forget that." Word spread quickly through school, despite Andrew's attempts to keep things quiet. Some kids were skeptical, others were in awe, but his true friends, like Chen, treated him exactly the same as always. "Just don't forget us little people when you're a famous inventor," Chen joked during their weekly video game session. "And please tell me you're not planning to wear that Lucky Space Shuttle t-shirt to meet the Musks." Andrew looked down at his worn NASA shirt and grinned. "What's wrong with it?" The night before the big trip, Andrew couldn't sleep. He sat in the garage, his makeshift workshop, surrounded by his projects and prototypes. Solar panels he'd salvaged from electronics recycling centers. Water heater models made from old water bottles and aluminum foil. Each piece represented hours of experimentation, failure, and eventual success. His mom found him there, still awake, at midnight. She sat down next to him on his workbench, both of them looking at the organized chaos of his projects. "Your dad would be so proud," she said quietly. "He always said you had an engineer's mind, even when you were tiny." Andrew leaned against her shoulder, remembering how his dad used to let him take apart old radios and computers. "I wish he could see this." "He can," his mom said firmly. "And he's probably out there bragging to everyone about his brilliant son who's about to show the world what he can do." They sat there for a while longer, surrounded by Andrew's inventions, both lost in thoughts about tomorrow. Finally, his mom stood up. "Get some sleep, baby. Tomorrow's a big day." As Andrew lay in bed that night, he thought about how a simple act of kindness on a rainy evening had led to this moment. His last thought before drifting off was that maybe, just maybe, some dreams do come true. The California morning sun felt different from back home in Philadelphia. Andrew stepped out of the Tesla that had picked him and his mom up from the airport, staring in awe at the massive SpaceX facility stretching before them. The building seemed to gleam against the clear blue sky, its modern architecture making it look like something from the future. "Deep breaths," his mom whispered, squeezing his hand. She looked as amazed as he felt, dressed in her best blazer that she usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. A young engineer named Dr. Lee greeted them at the entrance, her friendly smile helping to ease their nerves. "Ready for the tour?" she asked, handing them their security badges. Andrew nodded, trying to keep his hands from shaking as he clipped the badge to his new button-down shirt. The first stop was the rocket assembly area. Andrew's eyes widened at the sight of the massive spacecraft components. The engineers working there reminded him of his own tinkering in the garage, just on a much grander scale. He couldn't help but ask questions about everything he saw. "You really know your stuff," Dr. Lee remarked, looking impressed as Andrew explained his theory about improving fuel efficiency. Other engineers started gathering around, drawn into the conversation. Soon, Andrew found himself in a detailed discussion about propulsion systems, completely forgetting his nervousness. His mom watched from nearby, beaming with pride as her son held his own among some of the world's top engineers. One of them even pulled out a tablet to take notes on Andrew's suggestions. The morning flew by in a blur of amazing technology and fascinating conversations. During lunch in the facility's cafeteria, Andrew couldn't believe he was casually eating a sandwich while discussing renewable energy with actual rocket scientists. Then came the moment they'd been waiting for. Elon Musk walked into the conference room where they'd been asked to wait after lunch. In person, he looked exactly as Andrew remembered from that rainy night, though his clothes were considerably more professional this time. "There's my young engineer," Errol said warmly, shaking Andrew's hand. "I hope you don't mind, but I shared your solar heater designs with our team. They're quite impressed." Andrew's heart skipped a beat as several senior engineers filed into the room, carrying tablets and notebooks. One of them, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes, spread Andrew's sketches across the conference table. "Talk us through your design," she said encouragingly. "We're particularly interested in your ideas about cost reduction." For the next hour, Andrew explained his concept, his voice growing stronger with each minute. He talked about growing up watching his mom struggle to pay utility bills, about wanting to make sustainable energy accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. The engineers asked questions, took notes, and nodded approvingly. "Your son has a remarkable mind," Errol told Andrew's mom as they wrapped up. "But what impresses me most is his heart. He doesn't just see the technology, he sees the people it could help." Then came the biggest surprise of all. The door opened again, and in walked none other than Elon Musk himself. Andrew's mom gasped softly. Elon looked tired, like he'd just come from a long meeting, but his eyes lit up as Errol quickly explained Andrew's solar heater design. "Innovative thinking," Elon said, studying Andrew's sketches. "We need more young minds like yours in the field." He turned to Andrew with a curious expression. "I hear you helped my father with a flat tire." Andrew nodded, still too stunned to speak. Elon smiled. "Sometimes the biggest opportunities come from the smallest acts of kindness." He glanced at his watch. "I have another meeting, but I'm looking forward to hearing how your project develops." As Elon left, Andrew caught his mom wiping away tears. He understood why. This moment was bigger than just meeting famous people. It was proof that their family's values, kindness, hard work, and never giving up on your dreams, really did matter. The day wasn't over yet, but Andrew already knew his life would never be the same. Not because of who he'd met, but because for the first time, he could see a clear path to making his dreams reality. The second day of their California visit started with a surprise. Over breakfast at their hotel, Andrew received an email that made him choke on his orange juice. His mom rushed to read it over his shoulder, and both of them sat in stunned silence. The Musk Foundation was offering him a full scholarship to MIT. "But I haven't even applied yet," Andrew whispered, staring at his phone screen. "Keep reading," his mom said, her voice trembling. The email went on to explain that they would work with his school to ensure his application was fast-tracked for early admission. Plus, and this part made Andrew's head spin, they were offering him a paid internship at Tesla during summer breaks. Andrew looked up at his mom, who had both hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. For years, they'd avoided even talking about MIT because they knew they couldn't afford it. Now, suddenly, that impossible dream was within reach. Their driver arrived to take them to the Tesla facility, where Andrew spent the morning touring the research and development department. Everything felt different today, not just because of the email, but because the engineers treated him like a colleague rather than a visitor. During lunch, Dr. Lee pulled him aside with another surprise. "We've been discussing your solar water heater design," she said, pulling out a tablet. "The team made some modifications based on your concept. We'd like your input." Andrew spent the next hour reviewing their improvements to his design. They'd kept the core of his idea, but enhanced it with advanced materials he'd never had access to. His heart swelled when he saw they'd credited him as the original inventor. "We believe this could help millions of people in developing countries," Dr. Lee explained. "Would you be interested in continuing to work on this project during your internship?" Andrew could barely find his voice to say yes. Back in the main facility, they met with a group of young engineers who shared their own stories of getting started in the field. One of them had grown up in a small farming town. Another had been raised by a single parent like André. Their stories made him realize that his background wasn't a limitation. It was part of what made his perspective valuable. The day's biggest moment came when Errol gathered everyone in the conference room again. Andrew's mom sat beside him as Errol explained how they wanted to document Andrew's journey from finding him with the flat tire to developing his innovations at Tesla. "Your story could inspire other young people who think these opportunities are out of reach," Errol said. "Would you be comfortable with that?" Andrew thought about all the kids back home who had big dreams but small opportunities. He thought about his friend Chen, who was brilliant at coding but whose family couldn't afford coding camp. He thought about the students who used his mom's mechanic shop for their school projects because they had nowhere else to work. "I want to help set up a STEM program in my neighborhood," Andrew said suddenly. "Something free where kids can work on their ideas even if they don't have fancy equipment." The room fell silent. Errol smiled broadly. "I think we can help with that." Later that evening, back at their hotel, Andrew and his mom sat on their balcony watching the California sunset. Neither of them could quite believe how much their lives had changed in just a few days. "You know what makes me proudest?" his mom said softly. "That with all these amazing opportunities, your first thought was about helping others." Andrew leaned his head on her shoulder, just like he used to do when he was little. "I learned that from you, Mom. You always said we might not have much, but we have enough to share." As the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky brilliant shades of orange and pink, Andrew thought about how different his future looked now compared to just a week ago. But more than that, he thought about all the other young dreamers out there, waiting for their chance. Maybe his story could help them find theirs. Coming back to Philadelphia felt like waking up from a dream, except all the evidence was right there in Andrew's backpack. Official papers, business cards, and a Tesla company laptop they'd given him for his upcoming projects. The morning after their return, he sat at their kitchen table, still jet-lagged, trying to process everything that had happened. His phone buzzed with messages from Chen and other friends, eager to hear about the trip. But first, he had to face something more immediate, going back to school. His mom offered to let him stay home for a day to rest, but Andrew wanted to keep things as normal as possible. Walking through the school hallways felt strange. News of his California trip had spread, and he could feel eyes following him. Some students who'd never spoken to him before suddenly wanted to be his friend. Others whispered behind his back, spreading rumors about how he'd gotten lucky. During lunch, he sat with his usual group of friends, who treated him exactly the same as always. Chen punched his arm playfully. "So, did you wear the space shuttle shirt?" Andrew grinned. "Nah, but I wanted to." He pulled out his phone and showed them pictures from the facility. His friends crowded around, amazed by the rockets and labs. But what really got their attention was his idea for the neighborhood STEM program. "You really think they'll help set it up?" his friend Tommy asked. Tommy was a wizard with computers, but had been learning everything from YouTube because his family couldn't afford classes. "They're sending someone next week to look at possible locations," Andrew said. "I was thinking maybe we could use the empty store next to my mom's shop. You guys want to help plan it." The excitement in their eyes made his heart swell. By the end of lunch, they had started a group chat to share ideas for the program. His engineering teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, asked him to speak to the class about his experience. Standing in front of his classmates, Andrew felt nervous at first, but then he remembered how the engineers at Tesla had treated him. Like his ideas mattered, like his background was an asset, not a liability. "The biggest thing I learned," he told the class, is that being from a neighborhood like ours doesn't mean we can't dream big. Sometimes the best ideas come from solving problems we see every day. After school, Andrew headed to Wilson's Auto Parts for his shift. Mr. Wilson greeted him with a proud smile. "There's my famous employee." But instead of letting Andrew start his usual tasks, Mr. Wilson sat him down in the office. "I heard about your plans for the STEM program," he said. "I've got some space in the back of the store we never use. If you need it, it's yours." Andrew stared at his boss in surprise. Mr. Wilson continued, "Been watching you fix things and help customers for 2 years. About time others got to learn from you too." That evening, Andrew worked on a detailed proposal for the program on his new laptop. His mom came home from the garage to find him surrounded by papers, sketching out floor plans and making lists of needed equipment. The foundation coordinator called today, she said, hanging up her work uniform. "They're sending over the first batch of supplies next week. And guess what? 3 other auto shops in the neighborhood want to help with tools and space." Andrew looked up, overwhelmed by how quickly things were moving. "Mom, do you think we can really do this?" She sat down next to him, looking at his sketches. "Baby, you've already done the hardest part. You showed people that dreams can come true with hard work and kindness. Now others want to be part of that story." As they sat there planning, Andrew thought about that rainy night and the flat tire. One small decision to help someone had turned into something bigger than he could have imagined. But the best part wasn't the fancy opportunities or meeting famous people. It was being able to open doors for others, just like someone had done for him. 3 months after the California trip, the empty space behind Wilson's Auto Parts had transformed into something amazing. Andrew stood in the doorway, watching as kids from the neighborhood tinkered with computers, solar panels, and engineering kits. The place wasn't fancy, but it was already changing lives. The walls were lined with workbenches made from recycled materials. Donated computers hummed on old desks, and a giant whiteboard covered one wall, filled with ideas and calculations. In the corner, Tommy was teaching a group of middle school students how to build a simple robot from spare parts. "Look what I made." A 12-year-old girl ran up to Andra, holding a small solar-powered fan she'd built herself. Her eyes shined with pride as she explained how it worked. Just last month, she'd been too shy to even touch the equipment. Now she was helping younger kids with their projects. Chen walked in, carrying a box of new supplies from Tesla. The company had kept their promise, sending regular shipments of equipment and materials. But what made Andra even prouder was how the community had stepped up. Local businesses donated tools, retired engineers volunteered as mentors, and parents helped renovate the space. "The news crew will be here in an hour," Chen reminded him. Word had spread about their program, and a local TV station wanted to do a story. Andrew felt nervous about being on camera, but Dr. Lee from Tesla had encouraged him to share their success. It might inspire other communities to start similar programs, she'd said during their weekly video call. His mom popped in from her garage next door, still wearing her mechanic's uniform. "Just got a call from the science teacher at the elementary school," she said excitedly. "They want to bring 2 classes here next week for a field trip." Andrew couldn't help but smile. The program had grown bigger than he'd ever imagined. They now had regular workshops, homework help sessions, and even a small library of technical books. Best of all, everything was free, just like he'd wanted. His phone buzzed with a message from Elon Musk. The foundation was impressed with what they'd accomplished and wanted to use their program as a model for similar initiatives in other cities. They were also increasing their funding to help expand the space. "Andra." Tommy called from the computer area. "Can you help us? We're trying to figure out this coding problem." As Andra walked over, he passed a wall covered in photos. There were pictures of kids with their first completed projects, group shots from their weekly science challenges, and newspaper clippings about their success. In the center was a framed photo of that rainy night when he helped change a flat tire. Someone had taken it from a security camera at a nearby store. The coding problem turned out to be tricky, but Andrew loved watching the students work through it together. A boy who usually struggled in school had spotted the error that everyone else had missed. Now he was explaining his solution to the group, standing tall with newfound confidence. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Andrew sat at one of the workbenches, looking through college brochures. MIT had officially accepted him for the fall semester, and the foundation was already planning his summer internship at Tesla. His mom found him there, just like she had in their garage all those months ago. "Proud of you, baby," she said softly, looking around at what their little community had built together. Andrew picked up a small solar panel, similar to the ones he used to experiment with in their garage. "You know what's funny, Mom? I always thought getting into MIT would be the biggest thing that could happen to me. But this," he gestured at the room around them, "this feels even bigger." She nodded, understanding. Because it wasn't just about one person's success anymore. It was about showing kids in their neighborhood that their dreams mattered, that they had value, that they could be engineers and inventors and anything else they wanted to be. Outside, the sun was setting over Philadelphia, casting long shadows through the windows. But inside this space they'd created together, new dreams were just beginning to rise. 1 year after the flat tire incident, Andrew stood in front of a packed community center. The room was filled with familiar faces, neighbors, students from his program, local business owners, and even some engineers from Tesla who'd flown in for the occasion. Today was special. 5 more community STEM centers were opening across the city, all based on the model they'd created. Andrew still couldn't believe how their small program had grown. What started in the back of an auto parts store had sparked a movement. When I stopped to help someone that rainy night, Andrew began his speech, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I wasn't thinking about changing my life. I was just doing what my mom taught me, helping someone who needed it." In the front row, his mom wiped away tears, sitting next to Mr. Wilson and Chen. She'd closed her garage early today, just like she had for every important moment in this journey. Next to her sat the young girl who'd built that first solar fan. Now she was teaching other kids and dreaming of becoming an engineer herself. But the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about engineering or getting into MIT, Andrew continued. It was about how one small act of kindness can start a chain reaction. He gestured to the screens behind him, showing photos of their program's success stories. Tommy's coding class had won a state competition. 3 of their students had received science fair scholarships. A group of kids had even designed a low-cost solar charging system for the local homeless shelter. "Tomorrow, I'll be heading to MIT," Andrew said, his voice catching slightly. "But this community will always be my home. And thanks to everyone in this room, we've built something that will keep growing." The foundation had committed to funding the new centers for 5 years. Local businesses had pledged support, and former students were coming back as mentors. Even better, other cities were reaching out, wanting to start similar programs. After the ceremony, Andrew walked through their original workspace one last time. The place looked different now, more equipment, more students, more dreams being built. But the heart of it remained the same. A space where any kid could walk in and find the support to make their ideas real. Chen found him there, carrying a goodbye gift from the students, a scrapbook filled with pictures and thank you notes. "They wanted you to have something to remember us by," he said, then grinned. "Though I told them you're not exactly going to forget all this." Andrew flipped through the pages, stopping at a photo of their first group of students. "Promise you'll keep it going?" he asked Chen, who would be running the program while Andrew was at college. "Are you kidding? Someone's got to make sure these kids don't blow anything up," Chen joked, but his eyes were serious. "We've got this. You just focus on learning everything you can at MIT so you can come back and teach us." That evening, Andrew's mom hosted a small goodbye dinner at their house. Their tiny kitchen was crowded with people who'd become family over the past year. Mr. Wilson brought his famous chili. Tommy and his parents came with a cake decorated with circuit board patterns. Dr. Lee had sent a video message from California. As Andrew looked around at these faces, at the love and support that filled their small home, he thought about how life could change in unexpected ways. A flat tire had led to MIT. A simple act of kindness had created opportunities for hundreds of kids. A dream of making solar power accessible had turned into something even bigger, a way to show young people that their ideas mattered, that their future was bright. His mom raised her glass of soda for a toast. To kindness, she said simply, and to dreams that keep growing. Everyone echoed her words, and Ender felt his heart swell. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at MIT, but he knew he wasn't just carrying his own dreams anymore. He was carrying the hopes of every kid who'd ever walked into their program, believing that they too could change the world. And maybe that was the real miracle, not the scholarship or the internship or meeting famous people, but the way one moment of helping a stranger had created endless ripples of possibility, touching lives in ways he never could have imagined.